So I'm going to spend the next 40 or so minutes talking about, software infrastructure, so the plumbing behind IT. Yeah, and just it's quite an introduction. Please feel free to ask questions because I know the demographic of the people in the room is huge. So for me, trying to second guess what you're comfortable with is really difficult. So if you've got any questions, ask. Otherwise, feel free to ask myself or Kevin afterwards. Yeah, what I'm going to do is talking about an operating system based on open source software called Linux. Everyone comfortable with open source software? Yeah? Anyone uncomfortable? Okay. So I'm going to try and explain it in a sentence. If you're an open source developer, please forgive this comment. Yeah. But unlike proprietary software, where all the intellectual property of the software design is kept within the organization, open source software is like a giant science project. So everything we do, we share. Yeah? Which means in our mind, we can innovate faster and cheaper. Yeah? And the actual software is free. It's the service and stuff around it that customers are paying for. And what we're going to be talking about is a little bit of what we've been doing around Linux, but more importantly, what we're doing to prepare Linux for the cloud, and what we're doing around taking Linux and Linux infrastructures to the cloud. That's really what I want to do. But before I start, I wanted to just kind of explain from our perspective some of the challenges different parts of the organization are coming up with, which is driving cloud. Yeah? So there's a line of business professionals, of which some of my IT department would say I'm one of these people, who is constantly demanding something now. Yeah? I want a new application. So rather than wait for IT to deliver that application to me, I go and buy it outside of IT. Yeah? I'll give you some more examples of what I mean by that in a moment. But if I can't get it now, rather than rely on my IT department to get it, I go and be potentially what some people consider a maverick and go and get it outside of the IT department that's controlled by my enterprise. I've got the CXOs, the management team, saying, well, okay, I haven't got a budget for cloud. I'm certainly very nervous about pushing data and resources outside of my direct control, so I've got some real concerns around cost and compliance. And the poor IT guy is saying, I'm under a lot of attention to build this cloud solution, make cloud technology available to the consumers of IT, but how do I do that with my current budget and workloads? So taking each of those in a bit more detail, I thought I'd share some statistics with you. So if you look at the total technology spend of an organization, if you speak to Gartner today, about 20% of the technology spend of an organization is spent outside of IT. Yeah? So, there's the data behind that is people looking at procuring applications that run in the cloud, well, things like Salesforce.com, or using email in the cloud, and they've taken that decision completely away from IT and gone ahead and done it. Or people using, their own devices to connect to the organization. So these sort of things are driving and changing the dynamic of who is in control of the technology spend of an organization. Today, it's about 20% of technology spend is spent outside of IT in an average corporation. Gartner predicts that will climb to 90%. If the model currently stays as is, it would go to 90% unless we re-look at that. CXOs demand, so they can see the benefits of cloud, which I'll come on to in a moment, but they haven't got the money at the current climate to go and invest in the cloud. So it's like double-edged swords, and they're really concerned about compliance. And add to that, currently the vast majority of the world's IT professionals ultimately report to a finance function. And some of you in the room maybe tell me if that's true from your perspective. Yeah? And if you ask that team what their perception of IT is, yeah, they say the majority of them don't see it as strategic, which is staggering. So they see cloud as strategic, they see all of these technology as being strategic, but they don't see their IT department as being strategic in delivering it. then it's the IT guy, an IT team. So their view is, so how am I going to deliver this cloud? How am I going to keep in budget? How am I going to satisfy risk? And how am I going to do that with the resources I've got? And of course, from a technology standpoint, there's a big issue around complexity, because it's not about building a brand new infrastructure, it's taking the current infrastructure to cloud. And that, some of these things is really driving how we view open source software and how we view how we have to interact with partners to deliver what this guy needs, so ultimately he can deliver what the business needs. SUSE is a Linux company, we deliver plumbing. Yeah? Yeah? But you all want to experience the jacuzzi, you don't necessarily want to understand what's underneath the bath. Yeah? But it's underneath the bath is really important, that's what we need to deliver as a company. So cloud computing is really important because it can help reduce costs. So for example, in your own IT department, you're paying for everything. You've got a whole infrastructure you potentially needing to manage. But I'm arguing, if you only need email, why are you paying for the whole infrastructure? There's quite a famous book that talks about, if all you want is a glass of milk, why own a cow? So take that and same analogy to IT. So if all you want is cloud-based email, why do you have a server, an operating system? Yeah? Of course, over time, there's a bigger and bigger drive to take advantage of that. Also, through cloud-based technology, you can do an awful lot of automation. And this is where the line of business are really driving. I want the infrastructure to meet my requirements, and I want to be able to provision my own infrastructure. So some of the technical people want infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or even software as a service, should be provisioned by the line of business, not provisioned and controlled by IT. And it's all about delivering increased agility for business. That's what's driving the line of business function, and that's why there's more and more tension between what the line of business managers expect and what IT are delivering, which is why the finance guys are saying IT is not strategic in a lot of cases today. So cloud computing can help. And if we look at the numbers, and this is an amalgamation of numbers from IDC and Gartner primarily, it's happening to a lesser or greater extent. Yeah? And normally, virtualization is a stepping ground. How many of you are using virtualization technologies in your organizations? A good number of you, I suspect. I'll put this graphic up to explain some people's view of open source software versus proprietary software. Yeah? So our view, we're an open source software company. Yeah? We don't deliver proprietary software. However, we don't see proprietary software as necessarily bad. Yeah? So what we are religious about as an organisation is our customers, not about our methodology in delivering software. And the reason that's important to us is how many of you have already got an existing infrastructure in IT? All of you. So for us to come into an organisation and say your existing infrastructure is the wrong infrastructure and the correct infrastructure is one based on open source software, yeah, it's a religious argument. Yeah? And the religious argument needs to be about not our methodologies in how we develop software, which, by the way, we are very, very keen on and promote aggressively. But our religion is about delivering value to our customers, not about our software methodology, which kind of changes the way that we go to market. So our view as a company, what SUSE stands for, is about delivering enterprise quality products around Linux. That's where we've been today, and we're now expanding that to take what we've learned over the last 20 years around developing Linux for enterprise. So there's customers here, literally across the bridge in the financial capital, running SUSE Linux for their data centers or in their cash machines, through to running in healthcare. So we've got a great reputation delivering enterprise class Linux, but we also want to make sure we give you choice. Choice doesn't mean, we don't want to say go from a proprietary software vendor that locks you in to an open source software vendor that locks you in. Yeah? Because there's no value. So what we're looking at making sure we're doing is to do what I wanted to do with the cuddly toy, yeah? Is to give you all a hug. Now, what I mean by that is we want to make sure we embrace the technologies that are important to you and allow you the choice so that you can move those technologies to the cloud. So there you go. So I'm going to talk about what we've done to build our own Souza Cloud by using open source technology. That's one perspective of the cloud. The other perspective is to allow you to pick up our Linux operating system and deliver it in the cloud. So there's two perspectives of what we can do as an IT company. So we can either provide you with all the plumbing components so you can build your jacuzzi, or we can help you work with partners so you can go and procure a jacuzzi. Yeah, so there's a different perspective. And what we're trying to do is to give you as much choice as you possibly can have. So we've worked with multiple hardware vendors, multiple virtualization vendors. We partner with our friends at Microsoft to deliver maximum choice. Yeah? It's not you can take advantage of our technology if you replace everything that you've already got. It's about embrace. Yeah? Now don't get me wrong, if you haven't made a choice in any one of those decisions, then we're going to compete. But if you've made the choice, then we'll work with the partner that you've chosen to work with. So from a technology standpoint, let's just talk about the server infrastructure that's running inside your organization today. And primarily, you know, it's the operating system, the platform, and the software that sits in the cloud. But you know, you may want to build your own private cloud. So what we've been ensuring we do is to give you as maximum choice as we possibly can on the hardware choice that you have. So you know, we've worked with all the major hardware vendors, whether it's HP, Dell, IBM, whether it's Intel or mainframe, to give you as much choice on the hardware vendor, the risk, you know, the architecture of the technology, and there's emerging ones like ARM, to give you as much opportunity, as much choice as we possibly can for your data center for today and the future. Similarly with virtualization technology, some of you put your hands up and said we're running virtualization technology. So those of you put your hands up, how many of you are running VMware? VMware, okay. So a couple of comments on VMware. So they recommend SUSE Linux, and if you've bought vSphere from VMware, you get a copy of SUSE Linux with the product. Yeah. So this is not about us saying open source competes with VMware. It does, and we deliver technology to compete with us. But we want to be grown up enough to know if you've got VMware in your organization and your cloud provider is running VMware, we need to embrace it. Any of you using Microsoft Hyper-V? Same story applies. Yeah. So it's about embracing what you have. And similarly, if you're using Citrix Zen or you're using KVM in open source, the same applies. It's about making sure. So we include the open source variants of hypervisors in our Linux distributions. They're in there, no cost. And we embrace what could be perceived to be our competitors, but are our partners. And the reason they're our partners is because they're your partners. Yeah? So we're in a unique position as a Linux vendor that both VMware and Microsoft recommend our Linux distributions. Yeah? And we've developed a tool called SUSE Studio. This is what this little icon is about, just to give you a proof point. So if you build a Linux distribution, so you're installing it, you can build it once, and at a click of a mouse, it will provision itself as a VMware guest, or a Hyper-V guest, or an XEN guest, or KVM. So you haven't got to go and relearn and build different versions of the operating system for the different hypervisors. So we can build a Linux OS that's almost hypervisor agnostic, yeah? Which takes cost out and maximizes your choice. Taking that partnership to the next step at an operating system level, what has become much more apparent is there are two operating systems in data centers that are growing. One called Linux and the other one called Windows. And certainly virtually all of our customers that are running Linux today are running Windows. Yeah. But what is costly is having to manage them completely independently. So we've worked with people such as Microsoft. So Microsoft have a management tool called System Center Operations Manager. And through some tools from SUSE, you can manage your Linux estate and your Windows estate from a single pane of glass. So if your Windows administrators are familiar with System Center, then they can manage Linux from the same pane of glass. So it's taking the cost out. So we can even use Microsoft System Center to provision and to orchestrate a Linux workload. Yeah? Which now gets really much more important, because if you're going to go into the cloud, you may want to be using Microsoft's management tools in the future to provision tools into your private or public cloud. And this is about making sure that we're ready by embracing the tools that you may be using today and are likely to use in the future. Similarly, once you've got the operating systems, we also work with application vendors to ensure that you've got what I call a single point of throttle. Yeah? Yeah? There's so many vendors that, you know, whose fault is it? Yeah? So what we want to do is to work with people like SAP as an example, and 8,500 others, and this is growing every day, to make sure that entire solution stack is supported. So it's a bit more powerful than does the operating system run. It's about, no, we've got a partnership and a certification layer so that as we innovate around Linux, we don't break the application and vice versa. Yep. It's about giving you that single point of throttle, minimizing risk as we go to the cloud. So what we're trying to deliver through our cloud strategy is an open infrastructure. So you've got the flexibility of the hardware, flexibility of the hypervisor. Why is this really important to cloud? Anyone know what is the hypervisor of Amazon's EC2? Okay. Anyone want to know what the hypervisor is for Dell Cloud? Come on. How about the numerous versions of the UK government G Cloud? How many of you care? Yeah, that's the point, isn't it? But your technical guys do care, because what we're trying to make sure is the fact that you are able not to care. Because you can go back to that SUSE Studio tool, you can build and test it once and deploy it anywhere. That's a big differentiator in terms of cost of management. So that's a view of why you don't need to care, yeah, and you shouldn't care. So what we're trying to deliver is give you flexibility in private, public, and hybrid clouds by giving a combination of tools and infrastructure. Yeah? So here's some examples of the partners we use in public cloud. Yeah? This is supposed to be a little graphic to demonstrate G Cloud. There are numerous others. But might be what surprised you, just to demonstrate how grown up our relationships have gone with some of our partners. So SUSE Linux, you can consume that and use that in Microsoft Azure. So it might surprise you to know you can go and buy SUSE Linux from Microsoft and run it on Azure, because it was about giving you choice rather than giving you just open source software. There's numerous other examples about delivering tools. And through our products, we can use our products to build Linux once, so it'll run on all those hypervisors, and even we can start building it specifically for cloud providers. So you build and test your Linux infrastructure, and the tool behind the scenes prepares it irrespective of the cloud provider. So change in TAC. So that was pretty much talking about having the Gecko on the cloud. This is about taking all of the technology and experience that we have around building Linux in the open source world to building tools to allow you to build a infrastructure based on open source. And what we've done as an organization is to embrace an open source community called OpenStack. Any of you heard of OpenStack? Excellent. So OpenStack is probably the fastest growing community that's getting the biggest industry support. And we're delivering products based on this, as I come on to in a moment. In terms of our participation in OpenStack, we're a platinum member of the community. We even sit on the chair, so the SUSE employee is the chair of the OpenStack community. And we've been working with OpenStack to encourage them to embrace people like VMware. So you could argue, isn't VMware a competitor to OpenStack? But they're also a member of OpenStack. And that's about being grown up. And through the leadership that we have with some of our employees, we're now chairing that project. So what we're now looking at is delivering products based upon the OpenStack community. Yeah? And why is that's important is when you start looking at the project. So how many of you are technical people? Any technical people in the room? Okay. So this is a picture of what one of my technical guys would have on his whiteboard. So this is what Kevin at the back of the room would talk about. And that looks scary. So I've asked him to simplify that slide for me, because otherwise I would not have a damn clue of how to present it to you, to be very frank. So here we go. So he's turned it into numbers for me. So if you're going to deploy, just deploy and install OpenStack. This is before you then, yeah. The good news is you've only got 720 variables to configure, yeah. 11 sub-projects and key components to be installed, and it normally takes you 2 days to get it up and running. Yeah. So what we're doing, through our experience in open source software, is to take all of that technology and make it into a product, so it's considerably easier for IT to deliver, and then ultimately allows line of business to take advantage of what they ask for. So let me just kind of go through that again. So we have a product called Souza Cloud. So what we've done, we're the first company globally to productize the OpenStack community and deliver it as a enterprise capable cloud product. So you can build your own private cloud based on OpenStack. Yeah? And that's available today. And we've got customers playing with that and we're provisioning that technology today. And this is what we're aiming to deliver, and in some cases we're beginning to deliver. So going back to our line of business guy, he wants to be able to provision his own infrastructure to support his specific line of business application without having to go to IT and getting IT to go to procurement, to buy a server, deploy a server. We should be able to automate that process. So now the line of business guy can go and provision his server. It also means we can get a lot better utilization of the resources that we have by using this tool. Yeah? And going back from the message to the IT guy, so whether you're consuming a public cloud infrastructure, and we're trying to give you as much choice as we possibly can. I'll be honest, I got bored of cutting and pasting logos, but we're working with a considerable number of private cloud providers. I kind of use G-Cloud to kind of encapsulate a lot of providers in that space. And we want to make sure we embrace all of the hypervisor vendors that you've potentially currently got in your virtualization projects internally, or your private cloud projects that you may be having internally, to give you as much possible choice as you possibly can as a Linux vendor. Yeah. So therefore, you know, helping this poor IT guy delete something that's incredibly tough in terms of cloud provisioning. And again, we're building a product called Souza Cloud to take advantage of open source software and innovation to allow people to build the infrastructure around private cloud, to allow consumers to orchestrate, provision and manage their own Linux workloads. Yeah. I'm going to end on this slide because then we can have some questions if you've got any questions specifically. So who is SUSE? So we're an open source software vendor. You know, going back to, we deliver the plumbing underneath your jacuzzi. You know, if you're trying to analogize IT as a bath. Yeah. We develop in open source software. Yeah. So we develop software every day with our competitors. Yeah. It's a very grown-up model. But where we're unique is because we're we're religious about our customers, not around the way we develop software. So even though we're a Linux vendor, yeah, we spend a couple of days, well, and I personally spend a lot of time working alongside Microsoft and their Open Solutions group on how we can do business together. Similarly, we work with our colleagues at VMware and our colleagues at Citrix. Why? Because that's what's important to you. Yeah? You don't want to have to regulate the fight in your IT department between software vendors. Don't get me wrong, if you have not chosen, if you're still looking for choice and you said, I'm not sure if I'm going to run Windows or Linux, Brian, we're going to be in there convincing you to run Linux. But once you've made the choice to go Windows, we're going to ask you, so how can we add value? Yeah? because that's what I think people expect, and particularly expect as we go into cloud. Because if you look at a lot of the applications that are running in the cloud today, you don't know what the operating system is. You certainly don't know what the hypervisor is, per my comment earlier. So we need to be much more grown up in the way that we partner. And really, that is where we stand out as an open source vendor. Yes, we deliver Linux. Yes, we deliver open source software. Yes, we deliver services around that. But what stands us out compared to our competitors, frankly, is our unique relationships with Microsoft, our unique relationship with VMware, and numerous others. Yeah. So I'm going to end there because trying to cover the demographic in the room, everything from an introduction to open source software, Linux, and the cloud is tough. If you've got any questions, Kevin at the back is more than happy to take them. No, I'm joking.